So how has Israel been able to intercept the flotilla, even though it's in international waters, isn't it?
That is the point. This does happen in international waters. It's not an area that Israel has any jurisdiction over. It is 70 to 80 nautical miles off the coast of Gaza. Israel's jurisdiction would only extend somewhere between 12 and 24 nautical miles. But that doesn't worry the Israeli government. It doesn't worry the Israeli military or navy. This is not the first time they have carried out this sort of interception, and they are able to do it with relative impunity. I mean, we hear from activists, European parliamentarians talking out against it, but Israel is still able to do it. It has always been very adamant that it won't allow anybody to break the siege on Gaza. And over the years, there have been various attempts to do so. A significant one was 2010. 9 Turkish activists were killed in that one. But this is a massive one. As you said, 40, 50 ships, 500 activists on board. Israel has turned those ships back. Others are being dragged into Ashdod port. Those activists who are taken in, many of them will have to sign a declaration waiving their legal right against deportation, and Israel will send them out of the country.
We're seeing live pictures from one of these boats now, clearly still sailing, and daylight has just, or the sun has just risen there at the moment. Nicole, these activists say that they want to break the years-long aid blockade via sea on Gaza. How did it come about in the first place?
It's a really good question, and it's often lost when we're talking about this. The blockade on Gaza has been in force for 18 years, and this all started 2006. Hamas won parliamentary elections inside Gaza and the West Bank. It was democratically elected. It was allowed to run. But the international community wouldn't accept the result. They said that they couldn't have a, quote, terrorist entity controlling the Palestinian territories. Hamas then fought a civil war with its political rivals, Fatah. It kicked Fatah out of the Gaza Strip. It took control of Gaza. And that is when Israel really put the screws on Gaza. There were already heavy restrictions there, but they tightened the blockade. And I was living in Gaza during that period. It was an extraordinary time. There were hundreds and hundreds of tunnels between Gaza and Egypt to bring in the most basic supplies. I saw cars brought into Gaza, animals, crates of fish, all sorts of food because the restrictions were so tight. So for almost 20 years now, the Gaza Strip has been under blockade, and activists, every now and then they try and break the blockade, and these are stunts. They're not going to succeed, everybody knows it, but it does bring media attention to the issue.
Looking at another element of the conflict now, we're still seeing weekly protests in Israel against the war, but you've been speaking to a doctor who's been treating Israeli soldiers with mental health issues after serving in Gaza. What's he told you?
Yes, I spoke to a doctor, Tuli Flint. He's a therapist. He was a lieutenant colonel, reservist in the Israeli military as well. He has refused to serve in Gaza, but he has been treating soldiers when they've come out. And this is something that's getting quite a lot of attention inside Israel at the moment, the spate of suicides that we're seeing among Israeli soldiers. Since the war started, there's been around 60. Now, about a dozen of them have been directly attributed to the war in Gaza, but there's a huge amount of concern, as this doctor explained to me, about post-traumatic stress disorder with all of these soldiers returning to Israel and now finding these big weekly demonstrations on the street. Because as he said, many of them believe very strongly that they are fighting a, quote, just war in Gaza. Then they return to their societies, and more than half of Israel's population now wants the war to end. But I did ask Dr. Flint to tell me what is it that some of these soldiers have been explaining to him. And let's hear what he had to say.
Things that are against the morality that they were taught as trainees in basic training, that me as a commander, as a regiment commander, former regiment commander, I've never experienced something like that done in a war waged by Israel. Never, ever.
What sort of things?
Shooting unarmored civilians, depriving people from supply, demolishing hospitals and medical equipment, the perimeter, the bloody and the cursed perimeter, were an imaginary deadline that whoever crosses that line, the soldier need to shoot him, is something that the soldiers that commit this thing, if they are alert enough, or when they come back home and they are not in the frenzy of war, they start thinking about what happened to them, and they start questioning their own humanity and morality.
Powerful account there, Nicole. What's the Israeli military said in response?
We did ask them for a response and they sent us this statement. They said that they operate in strict accordance with international rules of engagement and international law to try and mitigate civilian harm. They said, which they have repeated throughout this war, that they're not targeting civilians or civilian objects, that the complaints will be investigated. We know, though, that there have been dozens of investigations throughout this war. And just for your background, only one Israeli soldier has been actually prosecuted and sent to prison throughout the 2 years of this campaign.